Welcome back to the RICO 12 Speaker Meeting Podcast. This is episode number 136, and we are continuing our Journey in Recovery series with long-form conversations that I had with recovering addicts from all backgrounds back in the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2020 when I did a series called Journey in Recovery in the Journey Through Life podcast. Any information on the Journey Through Life podcast you can find in the show notes. But in this meeting, I spoke with a woman named Jennifer. Now, here's a little bit about Jennifer. She shares her experience in addiction starting at about age 14 in this episode. Her addiction started with alcohol and then moved into marijuana and other drugs and psychedelics as she searched for God in her life and also in her quest to numb things from her childhood. And in this episode, and I only spoke with her once. I haven't followed up with her or had the chance to follow up with her in RICO 12 as a speaker guest. So if you would like to hear from her, do a Q&A, let me know. Send an email to rico12pod@gmail.com, and I can get her set up as a future speaker guest. But anyways, in this one, she speaks about her experience with Step 5 in working the steps of recovery in her Step 5. A reminder that if you find value in RICO 12, and if you would like to contribute to the cause in sharing this message with others and helping pay for the podcast platform, the website, all of the different things the different costs that go into running a podcast, we would be honored to receive donations from you. You can find information as to how to donate in the show notes of the podcast. And also, if you find value in RICO 12, please consider rating and reviewing us in your podcast platform of choice. We are found in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, virtually every podcast platform out there. Anyways, let's get started here and get into this conversation with Jennifer. We will be getting back to our regular live podcasts on January 6th, starting with the new year, going back to Fridays and having the live meetings then. But here we go. Let's get started with Jennifer. So tell me, Jennifer, introduce yourself. Introduce yourself as if you were introducing yourself in a 12-step meeting, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Hi, my name is Jennifer. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic addict. My sobriety date is March 25th, 2019. So actually makes me sober 260 days today.
Awesome. I'm happy for you. One day at a time, right?
Yep, one day at a time. I've got my little tracker on my phone.
Awesome. So Jennifer, tell me a little bit about your experience in life that led you to the addictive practices that you have done in the past.
Yeah, I'm still trying to uncover what led me to, get to my addictive history and habits. And I know sometimes, people are born with that genetically, and sometimes it comes through, habits. I think mine was probably both because I have alcoholism and addiction on both sides of my family. I started drinking at age 14, and it was when my parents were getting divorced. So I do think, it was a coping mechanism. There was also some molestation as a child. So I don't know if some of the trauma and things, I guess, wanting to escape the first time I got drunk, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was so much fun, and I got to escape, and, and then it progressed into, ecstasy, and then marijuana and cocaine and diet pills and pain pills and psychedelics, meth. I've done it all. And I think that, I was always just trying to escape my mind. Was always running, filled with worry and doubt and fear. And I became really good at it, that I was so-called successful, right? Where you have a good job, relationships, giving back in the community. So I was a very highly functioning addict.
So as you look back at that, I mean, you kind of relayed, it seems that the time period seems to coincide somewhat with a divorce in the family.
Yeah, and I guess starting to hang out with, after I left elementary school, I went to junior high, different groups of people, new things are being introduced. My parents were they loved me and they did the best they could, but they were in their own worlds at that time. So it's like I didn't really have maybe the oversight that is probably should be required at that time to keep your kids in check. So yeah, it was I was dealing with things, so it was a coping mechanism.
Well, good. So as you look back at that, were there any other coping mechanisms that you used that maybe wouldn't necessarily fall under alcohol or drugs or anything like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember I used to sit in the mirror and pick at my face. It's really weird, but just like, and actually that was a habit I had up until last year. I don't think I've really ever told anyone that, but that was like a part of an addictive thing. And I remember doing it as a child, and just sitting in my parents' bathroom all the time. And I remember I was always in my head, and and I didn't have control of my thoughts. I was wandering. And so, yeah, that was part of it. Now I'm struggling with sugar, I'm definitely sober and I'm pretty clean eater, but about one day a week, I have a binge sugar day, and I'm working on that. So I think there's still some of it there, but, at least now I'm conscious and it's not, I'm still a work in progress.
Right. Well, my sponsor once told me, I've got to work at this one day at a time every day for the rest of my life until I'm safely dead. And but I found that quite powerful phrase. And, it's one that for some people might bring some hopelessness, like, am I ever going to be able to be free of this? But for me, it's like, hey, I can do this one day at a time with God,
Yeah.
with God, I can do anything one day at a time. Tell me a little bit about when you first had these thoughts of maybe I'm getting a little bit out of control with my addictive behaviors.
Yeah, well, I was in my first marriage. Actually, we were partying really hard, had successful jobs, but drinking cocaine on the weekends. And, I knew it was a little too much, and I kind of had expressed it, and he wasn't kind of on the same path. I wanted to slow down, and he really still wanted to go out. So I knew then, because I was so hungover. I would be hungover in bed Sunday, go to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, feeling horrible. And then Thursday, I'm finally like feeling back to myself, and then start again Friday. So it was like a horrible cycle. But I was still kind of doing it. I wasn't ready to quit it all. And then during my divorce, I was 25, and I started going out and partying without my husband. And, he used to take care of me. I would like be blacked out or whatever, but he's like, he's got my back. So actually one night when the bar was closing, I was leaving a bar. I was actually by myself, and I fell off the end of an escalator. It was like about 5 or 6 feet up, and I remember just falling hard and like hit my head in concussion. And luckily there was this like angel guy who drove me home. I don't even know. I became conscious in like a Jack in the Box drive-thru. I guess I was like, I want tacos, and he got me home safely. Something bad could have really happened, and then I was like, I need to cut back, and that's when I cut back for about maybe 9 months. I didn't drink, but I was smoking weed every day. But that was my thing. Like, okay, well, I can smoke weed and I don't make bad decisions. I don't black out. So, life is good like that, and that was how I tried to fix it.
You said you cut back for 9 months. You're smoking weed. You stopped drinking at that time. What changes were you hoping would come into your life that maybe didn't come into your life that you were hoping to see happen?
I didn't really think so. I liked partying. I liked, altering my consciousness. It was how I lived for so many years. So I really was just not wanting to make any stupid decisions or get hurt. I realized that I just didn't make good things weren't happening when I was getting out and drinking and being hungover. So I thought it would be kind of cool to be like, I don't eat alcohol. I just smoke weed.
Okay. And then you said for about 9 months you stopped, you slowed down. What happened at the end of that 9-month period?
I started having a couple of drinks here and there, and then ultimately drank. I was working for a media company in Phoenix, and the guy I was working for knew me at the time where I had fell and hit my head, and I had stopped drinking, and he had an ex-wife that was an alcoholic, and he hired me, and he said, I'm hiring you because like you're not drinking, and and I ended up we had a big event, a big charity event that I helped him produce in Scottsdale, and I ended up getting drunk after it was over that night, was hungover the next morning, and he knew. I mean, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was there was media that we needed to finish off the next day to get out to outlets, and it wasn't perfect. I did what he asked, but then he wanted more, and I was like, I'm done. I'm going to sleep. And so he came in the next day on Monday and fired me. Even though I was already on my way out a few weeks later, we'd already talked about it, but it was just like he cut me. And so that was like, all right. And that's not when I stopped drinking.
Right. Did that start a whole new cycle of drinking then?
It was an interesting time in my life because I really had a calling. I wanted to travel and serve the world. And so I got an opportunity to do that. And so I went to work for an international nonprofit where I was traveling all around the world and training volunteers and serving patients with hearing healthcare. And I realized I could not be hungover and do my job. So I went back to then I really cut back. Drinking really didn't become a problem again for me. I'd say out of the next 5 years, there was only maybe 5 blackout nights that I regretted, which is still, maybe 5 to 10. I don't know. But it wasn't something that was like all the time. It was back to smoking weed. And then I was taking prescription diet pills for energy on the road. Yeah. So it didn't really stop me then.
So where would you say your rock bottom was?
My rock bottom was in 2012. I had been traveling and serving the world, and I got super depressed that summer where I just had a lot of anxiety. I had no motivation to work. I was lonely, and I could not. I tried to start moderating smoking weed. At that time, alcohol wasn't really a problem anymore. I'd have a couple of drinks and then I'd get high. I was more about smoking weed. And I really wanted to cut back, and I really realized I couldn't. I would wake up on a Saturday, I'd be traveling the world, get back on a Saturday, I have a whole day, and all I want to do is smoke weed. And I'm thinking, okay, I'll go work out. Like let me occupy myself, and then I can smoke weed at maybe 2:00 or 3:00. Because I know once I smoke, then I'm going to have a great hour, and then I'm probably going to overeat and be tired and the rest of the day, and my day's shot, and I'll just be smoking weed and eating for the rest of the day. So that was my rock bottom, and I just actually started where I just burn out. I realized I was burnout. I tried to go in the office. I couldn't even do simple emails, things that were always easy for me. I just dreaded, and so I actually just quit my job all of a sudden. I was so depressed one Saturday. I'm like, I'm going to quit my job. And looking back, I wish I would have gone and talked to the owners because they probably would have paid for my rehab. But I was just like, I'm done with this place. I'm out. I'm going to do it myself. I've always done things myself. I'm, a strong woman. I can do this. And that's when I quit my job. And then I started, I went in to the doctor and I quit smoking weed. I said, I'm done smoking weed. I'm not going to drink. I went and got on some antidepressant medication from my doctor. And for the next 6 months, I really tried to moderate myself.
And how did that work? We're talking, I mean, that's 2012, and you said your sobriety date's 2019. So we got 7 years in there, right? So how did that self-moderation and self-knowledge work out for you?
Yeah, not so well. Well, so I would get a month of not smoking, and then I'd be like, you know what? I'm really proud of myself. I'm going to let myself smoke weed 1 day a week. And I actually picked Sundays, which was kind of funny. And I was going well for a while. And then I went home to Arizona, went out and had some drinks with friends. And I was like, I'm on a 2-drink limit. Well, I threw that out the window, ended up doing cocaine that night, smoking weed, woke up really hungover. And I had promised to take my grandma to church the next morning. And I was like, oh, I do not want to go, but I didn't want to let her down. So I was smoking weed on the way of picking her up. And we get in the church and I get handed the program and it says addiction must fall. And at that point, I'd always believed in God, but I was like, wow, God's talking to me. I'm thinking maybe I need to get some help because I obviously can't do this alone. And so that was a wake-up call for me.
And that was that still in 2012 or was that?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean 2012. My low point was 2016.
Oh, 16. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was in about 2016 where this is all happening here.
Yeah, so that was 2016. Yeah. And then I was working with a life coach at that time, and I said, I need some help. I'm not sure what to do. And she's like, have you tried asking God for help? And I said, no, I just thought about everything else but that. And so I remember I got down on my knees and I asked God, I actually still have my journal from that night. And I said, God, can you please help me change my story before something bad happens to me or, to someone else? God forbid. And then within a few weeks, I got some guidance and I started researching for help in my area. And I found Marijuana Anonymous. So my first day, I think, was January 2nd, 2017, when I walked through the doors at my first 12-step meeting.
All right. So before you move on from here, what were your thoughts before you walked in the door? Was that a scary experience for you? Was it something that you were really worried about doing?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely never had been, but I emailed with this lady. Her name was Wendy online. And so I had talked to her in advance. So, I was like, at least feel comforted I was going to meet this lady. But it was super weird. But I'm lucky. It was seriously like 5 people. It was the smallest meeting I've probably ever been to.
Okay.
I was living in Syracuse, New York at the time. Actually, it was then she encouraged me to go to AA meetings because I come to find out it was like, I could stop smoking weed, but if I have a couple of drinks, it's all the same. So, I needed full sobriety, and she just encouraged me that AA had a bigger network, than Marijuana Anonymous. And I realized it's all really the same. You can really go into any 12-step meeting and plug in whatever your,
Right.
habit, hang up, or hurt is, and it works. So, I think going into my AA meetings, I was super fearful. And I remember even like my 5th meeting, I just almost walked out. I was like, I don't like these people. I'm not an alcoholic like them. This is not my thing. I am not coming back. But I think that ultimately I asked that lady to be my sponsor, that first lady, Wendy. And she said she wanted me to go to a meeting every day for a week. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And so I didn't the first week. I was like, I went to one meeting, I didn't even have a job at this time. Right. So I obviously had the time. I had no excuse. I don't want to go. And finally she said, like, if you want a different lifestyle, you have to be willing to do things, do life differently and take the instruction of people that have done it. It works if you work it, right? So I was like, fine. I didn't want to do this, but I decided I was going to go to a meeting every day for a week. And by like the 3rd day, I actually started to enjoy it. And I was like, okay. And I realized that this was something good for me. And so I'm just super glad that, I pushed through, even though like I didn't want to go at the beginning. I didn't want to get involved, but it's like, it's worked for so many people. And everyone's story is different. I'm not going to be an alcoholic or addict like you are, or, whoever's listening, everyone's got their own story. But the fact is the formula works.
I agree with you 100%. The formula works. It's there. The recipe has been proven. And when we talked and when I connected with you, you got back to me and said, hey, I'd like to talk about step 5. Now, tell me what step 5 is first.
Mm-hmm.
And then tell me why step 5 is the one that you wanted to talk about.
Sure, definitely. Would love to. So step 5 is we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is followed by step 4, which is really like a written inventory of your wrongs, right? I picked step 5 because step 5 was really relieving for me. It was really like a big getting over the hill for me. I actually really lagged on step 4. I probably lagged about 4 months. I just did not want to do that inventory. I was fearful of it. And then finally, after I did it, really confessing it, it showed me the insanity of, what I was doing. I think that's one of the beautiful things. They call step 5 kind of the confession step, right? So you're confessing to yourself, to God, and another human being. And I was on my 3rd sponsor by this time because I did all the things wrong in New in sobriety. Don't leave a relationship. Don't change a job. Don't leave the city. I did all those. So I am in Austin, Texas now. My second sponsor relapsed, so third sponsor. And, I went to her house and we did it. And it was about a 2-hour thing where I went through all the people, places, ideas, and institutions that I was resentful at.
Mm-hmm.
And, what action was taken that made me angry or hurtful. And then, what it affected. Was it my self-esteem, pride, emotional security, pocketbook ambitions, and or sex relations? And then the fourth part was, where was I to blame in all of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, was I dishonest? Was I selfish? Was I self-seeking? Was I frightened or inconsiderate?
Let's stop there and dig for just a second. Think about one of the line items there in your negative emotions tab, in your resentments tab, where you are absolutely sure that your part in that was, if anything, was like 0.1%. How did you go about doing that and saying, okay, this is my part in it? How did you come to the point where you could say, all right, here's my part of that issue?
Well, I want to go back to that example of my friend that I work for that fired me, because I never thought I did anything wrong until I actually went through the step. I was like, he's a jerk. I probably said some other words. He fired me. I had already resigned, but I was finishing out this job, and then he just came in and fired me, and that was so hurtful. He's such a this, and I had to actually look back and go, okay, he hired me, and because I wasn't drinking, that was a big thing for him, and I was representing him and I didn't follow through. And so, yeah, I was really to blame for that. That was just part of the consequence of my actions. And so it wasn't out of, I was inconsiderate, and I could say selfish in these things, but it was part of my addiction too, but it was just wrong. And so at the end of the day, I'm like, geez, that's his company, and he didn't like deliver the most quality product to his biggest client because I was hungover.
Yeah, and that's a good example, I think. So let's go back to step 5. You talked about your negative emotions tab there. Tell me a little bit about your experience as you went through those different areas.
It's funny because I did another type of step 5 in a different program this past year.
Okay.
And instead of writing out the resentments, I had to write out every single time I can remember drinking or using a drug and what happened from that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's like 50 pages long. And like who I heard, what happened. And that was really, really telling, even more than because I think that I let go of a lot of, I didn't think at this point, I had too much anger in my heart. I mean, people go through different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have as much anger, I guess, but through both of these exercises, I realized that I was selfish and a self-centered person.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing. I'm like, wow, I'm a very selfish person. So that sucks.
Yeah, and that's where we go to step 6, where we recognize our character weaknesses and defaults, right?
Yeah, and I wasn't honest, and like that. So I was selfish. Yeah.
So tell me, as you did your step 5, you're admitting to yourself, to God, and to another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. Tell me how. I mean, was there a burden that you were carrying as you went through your step 4 inventory that you're like, man, I'm the worst human being on earth? And did it change as you finished your step 5, or was there any transition at that point?
I felt very relieving after step 5. I felt like the hardest part was done. That's why I like to pick step 5, because it was like, it's relieving, right? You're basically just admitting your wrongs, right? And becoming a clean conscious, So I felt like after that, things really progressed fast, but I really took a long time to get through step 4 and 5.
This step is really fresh on my mind right now because just last night I had one of my sponsees do his step 5. It was about a 4-hour deal. And as I was, just checking in with him and giving feedback every once in a while and asking questions, as he was moving along, he'd be like, man, I just feel like I'm a monster. Like I'm the worst human being on the face of the earth. Mm-hmm. And then as we finished up and he had what I do is I have them have a step 5 prayer where, we open it with a prayer and close it with a prayer. And in that step 5 prayer, he's like, it's all yours, God. I'm giving it to you. And afterwards, he's like, man, that load is gone. I'm not a monster. It's not me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't have to carry any of that stuff. And I love that concept of giving it over, giving all that crap that's in my life over to God and just saying, hey, I know you can carry this. I know you've already taken care of it. So here it is. I'm not gonna carry this anymore.
Yeah. And also, one of the things I learned through the program too is just that I incorporate is living that step 5. Like when I realize that I've, done something wrong or I have a resentment at somebody, then I will talk to him about it and get it off my chest, or I know it'll build into something more. Or if, for example, if I feeling jealousy toward a friend about something, like and they're a close friend, I'll just tell them like, hey, look, like I'm feeling a little jealous about this. I don't know why, it's super stupid, but because it just gives you that clean heart. I think bringing things to light just kind of like diffuses them,
Yeah. So give me an example maybe of a time when a resentment, that a little thing that you dwelt on for a long time became big enough to where you felt, okay, I have to go use because this, well, maybe you don't think it through that way. I have to go use, but that resentment leads to you using in the end, even though it was really small in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it wasn't really like that because I was using no matter what, whether it was a continually thing throughout the day. Like for like the last 5 years, it was like, okay, I would wake up, I would get high, then I would go do this. And then I'd be planning my next high, then I would go do this. And I would have a drink, then I'd have a half of a Vicodin, then I'd go do this and I have a smoke. Like it was just like perfectly timed out where I could have the alteration of my consciousness and also work and do what I got to do. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't really about a buildup. It was always smoking or taking something.
So you're always numbing and not really recognizing those resentments at the time, even though they were there and were building, because all you're doing is numbing it, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think I was using it. I think I was more numbing it because of the deep-seated issues from childhood. Because if I were like as an adult, something would bother me, I would go end up in having a conversation with someone. I felt like, the life that I was living, I'd done personal development work. I would talk about issues if things happen. I think, it was the unhealed trauma from the past and my emotions. And I never learned how to deal with my emotions. And I never learned how to take control of my mind. It was running me.
Now, you mentioned earlier that I think it was a therapist. I can't remember who you said, but it said, hey, have you ever prayed and asked God to take this from you and help you with this? And you're like, no.
Yeah.
Tell me about your concept of God beforehand and your concept of God now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I grew up Catholic. I always believed in God. I left Catholicism at 18 because I had all the rules and the legalities, and I just kind of went on a spiritual journey. So I was into a lot of New Age stuff, and I always felt connected to God, but I didn't really know what that meant. And so when I went through AA and they say, a God of your understanding, that was easy for me because I was just like, I believe that God's a higher power. And then I was sober about 2 months and I'd end up at this conference in Texas with 12 other women and myself. And all these women were like, successful and happy. And I'm sober, but I'm seriously unhappy. I'm like struggling. And I'm like, what's wrong with these women? Like, they're not high on drugs. And I come to find out like they were high on the Holy Spirit and these were women of God and they believed in Jesus. And, I always had thought people that believed in Jesus were naive.
Okay.
And so I just started kind of like questioning things and started getting kind of mentored. And one of the women encouraged me, to seek. And the Bible says, ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock on the door will be opened. And so I started dialogue with, I'm like, all right, Jesus, if you're real, like, please reveal yourself to me, and I opened my heart and mind and series of events happened. And the first time I was headed to Ireland on a flight and I'm going to meet one of these ladies. And at the bookstore, I saw a book that says Bible verses for women. And I was like, I'm going to buy this for her as a gift. And maybe I'll look at it because I'm kind of exploring.
Right.
And so I'm getting off the plane in Ireland. We're getting off. And there's this couple next to me. And this woman reaches above for her bag. And she looks at her husband and she says, is this your bag or is it this little child's bag? And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah. She's like, you look like a little child. And I was like, well, thanks, but I mean, I'm 33 at the time.
Uh-huh.
And then she goes, yeah, you look like a little child. And I was a little jet lagged and I was tired, but I was really offended. I honestly, like, usually I don't let things get to me, but I was like major resentful for 2 hours. I'm like, how rude. And I get to my hotel and I sit down on my bed and unpacking and I see the book. So I just decided to open it to a random page. And it says, Jesus asked you to come to him like a little child. And that's the first time I was like, all right, Jesus is really speaking to me now. And yeah, many just series of events happened. And that really started my journey, my personal relationship with Christ. And within a year, I had decided to accept Jesus into my heart and make him Lord and Savior. And that's when my real healing began. So I just thank AA so much. It's such a great program for, if it would have been about Jesus, then I wouldn't have found my way to Jesus, So it was it's such a pivotal part of my story. I'm just super grateful for AA. And it was really built off, right, the Oxford group.
Yep.
A lot of it came from Christianity. And I think that's a reason why some of this works. It's surrender, it's confession. The only problem with it, I personally feel, if people just stick with it, they're missing the eternal salvation. They're missing the main point of, Christianity, why Jesus came. So yes, you can stay sober, but I mean, is that the point? I think that we're called to go further. We're called to heal. And the only person I believe that will heal is Jesus. And also, I want everyone to have eternal salvation too. So I'm super grateful for it, but I think that it should be a pathway and not the end all.
Yeah. So step 12 for me is a huge one. That's where I do that evangelizing, that preaching about it. You know, one of the people in the Bible, and I'll ask you about maybe a Bible hero of yours, but one of the people that I most relate to in the Bible is Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Peter was so enthusiastic. He was the first one out of the boat when Christ said, "Hey, come follow me." Yeah, I'm there. And he was so enthusiastic, but every time in Christ's mortal ministry, he was this enthusiastic, he ended up falling on his face. Hey, come out and walk on the water. All right, here I go. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sinking. Help me. At the Last Supper, hey, don't wash my feet, Jesus. Well, if I don't wash your feet, you don't have anything with me. Okay, wash my whole body, wash everything. And he's just all excited. And then Jesus says, hey, you're going to deny me 3 times. He's like, no, I'm not. And he does. He denies him 3 times. And then even after the resurrection, Peter's out fishing. And Jesus is like, come on, man. Are you back doing this again? You got to do something more. And he says, feed my sheep, feed my lambs, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. When thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. So Peter's been following Jesus for 3 or 4 years at this point, and he's still not converted.
Mm-hmm.
When you're converted, go and strengthen others. And to me, that conversion is what you're talking about here. You came and you found Jesus as that person. For me, same thing. I found out who Jesus was, who and how he fits into everything. Well, how everything fits into him, actually. But
yeah.
And then how, for me, these 12 steps really encompass his atoning sacrifice and the whole picture there, all in these 12 steps.
Yeah.
And my conversion is that for an addict, for anybody with weakness, whether it's an outward addiction that everybody can see, or whether it's just a foible that I can't take care of because I'm powerless over it, whatever it may be, that there's hope in being able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've become converted to it, and now I'm out trying to strengthen my brethren.
Yes.
And that's how I relate to Peter, and that's how I bring that into the program. So tell me a little bit about maybe something from the scriptures that really speaks to you from your experience, maybe in addiction or maybe in life and overall.
Well, I guess what I want to say for you asking that is I truly believe the word of God transforms the mind. In Romans 12:2, it says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So you'll come to know the good and pleasing, perfect will of God." And when I got out of sobriety, my mind was still worry, doubt, confusion. I need to be doing this, like never satisfied. And so what I've learned is by studying the Bible that the word actually transforms the mind. And there's neuroscientists now that are actually like proving like our mind's like a tree of life. And when you're smoking weed and doing drugs, it's like your mind's all over the place and you're building new neural pathways actually. So that's the one thing I want to say overall has been the most important part of my healing is to getting my mind right is reading the word, is pronouncing scriptures. When I'm walking my dog, I'm saying, I am strong. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I am righteous. I am the righteousness of God in Jesus Christ. I'm just saying scripture. And so that's an overall thing. And I just want to tell people if you don't believe in Jesus, that's totally fine. But I've done it all. I've done DMT, I've done all the psychedelics. I did everything to try to find God. And I still felt like I was connecting to God when I was doing drugs. But now I realize when you really get a relationship with Christ, like that's the real drug. When Jesus starts talking to and he gives you revelation of the word through his spirit, that's more powerful than anything that I could do. So I learned so much through the Bible, I love, the parts, God's teaching me a lot now. He's still working, taking things out of my heart that are impure in my heart, dealing with when it says like love your enemies, right? I'm working in Hollywood at a church where I have homeless people that are addicts that are still using. And it's very challenging for me right now because I kind of want to be like, why am I even here? I'm just going to go to a church where it's people I want to hang out with. But I know God's growing me here and he's challenging me when I want to be like, oh, that person. And then instead I'm praying for that person. So it's like challenging us and teaching us to be more like Christ, to be more loving. Really not living for myself. And you asked me earlier about what's another thing of addiction that I see myself. Well, it's every day I have to try not to control because that was my biggest thing, I think, is trying to control situations and I'm in charge and this and that and I'm doing it. And now I'm learning to rest in the spirit and that God opens things and I follow. I can be directed by him and the stress is gone. I used to be addicted to fight or flight mode. Everything was like, okay, we got to do it. We got to do it. And I'm barely living in that now because I've just, that's why I was always changing my consciousness. Your heart rate's going up all the time. There's fear. I have deadlines. And so now I'm actually, peace of mind is the biggest thing that I've gotten from sobriety. And then the Bible also gives you that joy, the joy of the Lord, the joy regardless of the circumstances. I could have just lost my job and I could still be like, you know what, but I have joy. You feel that joy in Christ. So that's just kind of the Bible as a whole. I know I didn't answer your question. And I can if you still want me to.
Have at it.
I think that one of the stories or the people that I like is the Queen Esther in the Bible. Is that she was the queen. She was Jewish, didn't know, and she got the opportunity to help save her people. That she had to come out to her husband, the king, and tell him about it. And she could have got killed.
Right.
But she was in, God put her in that place at the right time where she was able to come in and help save her, her people, the Jewish people. So I think that's kind of a beautiful story about, stepping out and having courage.
Yeah. So how do you put yourself in those shoes there in your life today?
I think that God challenges us or gives us the call every day to spread the good news of the gospel, and I think just having the courage to get out and speak from the heart, and even though you're worried about what people are going to think, when you feel prompted by God, just having the courage, knowing that, hey, we're talking about when we this life is a matrix. This is great. I want everyone to be happy here. But at the end of the day, I want to see everyone in heaven, This is like a matter of life and death. We're on the battlefield. So I feel like, having the courage, sometimes I don't want to do it, but I feel like, we're not the one that converts either. And that's what I had to learn. I'm the seed planter. I might mention it to someone, and maybe 5 years later, someone else helps them come to the Lord. But it's my job to share my story,
Mm-hmm.
of recovery and of how Jesus really, like, I say AA got me sober and Jesus healed me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me ask a couple of kind of wrap up questions. And this is a question that I typically ask my sponsees a couple of times through the process of working through the steps. And I asked this of the person that I spoke with yesterday about step 2. Define for me these 4 terms: abstinence, sobriety, recovery, healing.
Okay, abstinence, not using any alcohol or drugs, which are like illegal drugs, I would say. So that's abstinence, no alcohol or illegal drugs. Sobriety. Sobriety just means clean and sober. Sobriety to me means being in like living a lifestyle of not using alcohol and drugs.
Okay. And then the third word is recovery.
Recovery to me is that you had been out drinking and using, and now that you are no longer in, you're off the cycle of addiction. So I feel like the cycle of addiction is where like you use, and then you have regret, you say you're never going to do it again, and then you use, you start thinking about it, and then you do it, and then you're just a continual cycle. So recovery is you're off that, but you're doing certain things to make sure you're staying off that. So you have a program that you're working and something you do to maintain your sobriety.
All right. Then the fourth word is healing.
Jesus Christ.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's healing is spirit, soul, and body. So I think it's doing those things, that having a personal relationship with God, with Jesus, allowing him to work with you. And then your mind, your soul is your mind, will, and emotions. So working on, what you're putting in your mind, how your mind is thinking, and, working out some emotional things. And then your body, working out, what kind of foods are you eating? So working on that, all helps with your healing, I feel.
Okay. Well, very cool. Now, let's say that you, and it sounds like you may be going to a place just like this tonight. Let's say that you are approaching somebody who is saying, I'm really struggling and I need help. So how would you, in that situation, approach that person and invite them to make some steps toward abstinence, sobriety, recovery, and healing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would encourage them to go to a meeting, and I would say I would go to one with them, probably. Mm-hmm. Because I know that works. And it's like, I think that's the best thing, is to get them to meetings. So if they were in my area, I would go with them. And actually, I would share my story first, probably, right? I think that's what we're supposed to do. Or out of the big book is just show our own personal story about how our life was before, drinking and waking up next to someone, I don't know their name, all these different things, and how I struggled, and then now where I'm at. Like, it's a process and there's a formula, and encourage them to get to a meeting and just surrender themselves to the program. I went every day for 9 months, sometimes multiple times a day. Mm-hmm. And, I say, no one really likes it at first, but then there comes a time where you like love it, right? Yeah. And that's like the craziest thing, but it's like,
yeah, a phrase that I use sometimes is, some of my best friends are people that I have no idea what their last name is.
Yeah, right. I love that. And I just talked to someone yesterday, because people, I like to be open about it on social media. So people will message me and say, I resonate with you. If they're out of state or I don't know them, I jump on the phone with them and I just kind of share my story, and I am compassionate, but just kind of encourage them, to get into a 12-step meeting. Yeah.
So how do you encourage somebody who's scared to death to walk through those doors and maybe see someone that they know and be so embarrassed by that or whatever, to just go and do that?
They have to be so ready that like their life is like, they can't go back kind of sometimes they have to be in a point of turmoil, where there's like no other option, or
That whole rock bottom thing, huh?
or I say, yeah, what do you want to happen? Do you want to get in a drunk driving accident? Do you want to get a DUI? Like, what's it going to take for you to change your life? Because I'm telling you, like, this is the way to do it. There's, I don't know how many, is there over 1 million people now, or millions, or I don't know what it is in AA.
Lots and lots.
But it works. Yeah, I sometimes kind of say that, like, what is it going to take for you to do it? Like, because it's not going to get me better. Have you suffered long enough? Or if you want to suffer a little bit more, that's fine. When you're ready, come talk to me. Because then it kind of gets on their mind, like, okay, like they're in this horrible cycle. They're not happy. And that's where I was. Like, if I could still drink and do drugs every day and be happy, I would have never quit. Like, but it got to the point where it didn't work anymore. It wasn't fun anymore.
Right.
Luckily, I didn't go to jail. Some people end up dead,
Yeah. Addiction will lead to death every single time if we aren't able to figure out how to get help.
Mm-hmm. And I guess just for people, sometimes it's like you don't have to be unsuccessful. You don't have to be in the worst place. If you're struggling and thinking about using all the time, or it obsessed my mind. It was just like always thinking about when I was going to drink or use drugs next. Like, that's not normal.
Right.
Like, I thought that was normal. I didn't think I actually had a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, and it's not a way to live. And now I'm free, and it took a few years to work on, and I'm still healing. I have a long way to go. But I'll tell you, I have more peace and joy in my life. The peace is so much valuable than the highs and the lows. Sometimes it's a little boring, yes, but it is so much more fulfilling than the chaos.
I love that. The peace that surpasseth all understanding, right?
Yes.
I appreciate that, and I love that. So are there any other words of wisdom or anything else that you really feel is necessary or appropriate to share before we close up this conversation about step 5 or recovery as a whole?
I just want to say that if you're listening and that you're struggling, have the courage to walk in those doors. Have the courage to reach out to someone for help, because it's not easy, but it's simple. And you can do it. We've both done it, and life gets better. I mean, if you have someone that that's struggling, maybe send them some of these podcasts. I may resonate with one person. The next guest might resonate with someone else. So I think that's why it's important that we put ourselves out there and share our story. So I appreciate you letting me have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and thank you for being willing to open up and share those things. I mean, it'll mean a lot to a lot of people.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. There's Jennifer E. We're so grateful that she was willing to share that back in 2019, 2020, and that we're able to repeat it here again in 2022 in the end of the year. What a great way to close out the year with these kind of long-form conversations, getting deeper into people's stories than what we can typically learn in a 20 to 25 minute share with a little bit of a Q&A session afterwards. But I'm excited to get back to those Q&As here in a few weeks. And anyways, let's continue on here. Thanks again for your support of RICO 12. If you find value in these meetings and in these episodes, please consider donating and rating and reviewing in the podcast platform of your choice. And remember, there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Keep coming back, everybody. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. anyone like me survive the storms and walk through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight. Still searching,